David Sabek coming to you again for New York Festival's Creativity from the Other Side, where we speak with incredible people in our industry and people outside of our industry, people who are just breaking down the walls of creativity all over the place. I'm so happy and honored and proud to have today an FOD, a friend of David, Omar Sabek, someone I've spent some time with, someone I've learned from. I literally went to grad school with you, so I want to thank you. Omar is also sponsoring our Future Now category, the first time we've ever had this category, a category that is revolving around technology and the appropriate and important use of technology in our industry, the important use of technology, people who are using it actually in ways to make a difference, and hopefully, and we'll talk about this at the end, will actually be minting NFTs for the winners. So the awards will be an NFT. But most importantly, more important than anything we've talked about, Omar's story begins in the borough of Queens
Yes.
in New York City. And that's where the story of all his creativity starts.
Yes. Queens, the epicenter of diversity. And diversity brings perspectives, and perspectives bring creativity. So I was born and raised in Queens.
Parents came from Egypt?
Parents came from Egypt. They came here in the 70s. They landed in Queens probably because that's where JFK Airport is. I never asked them exactly why Queens, but that
So just tell
plausible.
that story. We talked about this. Somebody had said to me, who was also came from an immigrant community, said, "Do you know why we all end up in Queens?" I said, "No." He said, "Because we get off the plane, we don't speak much English. Queens is the easiest place to get to." I said,
Exactly.
"Wow, what
You don't have to cross a bridge. You're right there. Yeah. So I grew up around technology. I got my first computer when I was 7 years old. Always very interested in it. I made a career out of it. I worked in government media. I finished my career in financial technology. In 2011, I first heard of Bitcoin, and I did a little bit of research, but I didn't fully grasp it. I didn't fully understand it. And then in 2013, I had to actually buy some because I was buying services that would take Bitcoin. So I bought some, and that's when I really, it all came together for me. It came together for me as, everything that we hear about it today. It's a scarce digital asset. It's backed by the consensus of this proof of work process, which is immutable, so it can't be tampered with, which is a problem for money. The monetary policies can consistently shift. So, all of these inherent properties of Bitcoin were incredibly attractive as an investment. So I got involved pretty early with it, and here we are today, and it's becoming more and more a part of people's.
So let's talk
lives.
about Bitcoin for a minute. And we spoke a lot about the history of money as part of the graduate education that
Yes.
you gave me, and I studied very hard before we met because
You're a great student.
I wanted to be able to at least hold my own in a conversation, knowing how much you know. But what I found interesting is coming into the conversation, I think many of us think of Bitcoin as strictly a speculative investment, and we don't see it as a stable currency. And yet, if you follow the history of money, it's very clear that the history of money is full of stories like that, of currency that begins one way, ends up the other. Maybe it begins as speculative, ends up as being stable, or begins stable and ends up as speculative. And yet, this seems to be certainly by the people who believe in it, to be as stable a currency as one could possibly have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea that it might be speculative might come from maybe a lack of understanding of the economic incentives that are within the Bitcoin network as it relates to the miners and as it relates to, Satoshi Nakamoto, the person that created Bitcoin, figured out a way to get individuals that are usually non-cooperative to each other to continue with that non-cooperative behavior, but do it in an ecosystem where it would benefit the collective. And
where non-cooperation is a benefit.
Non-cooperation is a benefit, absolutely. And if you
explain that.
So we all have our own wants, desires, and needs. This is human action. This is human behaviors. Everyone is always looking out for themselves. So with Bitcoin, if I'm a miner or if I'm a participant on a network, I could still retain my individual desires by mining Bitcoin, by buying Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin. And if more and more people do that, then the network gets bigger, there's more transactions, there's more utility, there's more value to the network, there's more hash power through the mining process, because ultimately these miners are computers that are think of it as like gold mining. Instead of having heavy drills go into the earth to take the gold out of the ground, you're using a computer to solve cryptographic puzzles to extract from the network Bitcoin. So everyone that participates in the Bitcoin ecosystem can still, go into it with, greed and come out of it with value, and that value increases over time as more and more people join the network. But ultimately, what it comes down to is trust. And what makes a good money is a money that people can trust. And a money that people can trust over time, we've seen it with gold, it becomes the base unit of account of a society. So I see that Bitcoin is on that path now. It's still very young. It's only 10 years old. But, a friend of mine was actually on 47th Street the other day. And he had some gold that he was selling. He was turning it in. And the line was out the door. And he looks around and he notices that everyone on that line is, it's got like white hair and, they're older. And so they're all buying gold. There's not that, I don't know what the ratio is, but there's not many, young people that are waiting online to buy gold today. Gold. They're all thinking about it in terms of digital scarcity, digital assets. Most of them are, at least. How do I get a piece of this thing that over long periods of time will go in value? And they fully understand the volatility. The volatility is, anything that's new. If you look at any new, the big brands that we know today, Google, Microsoft, Apple, you name them. If we look at the early price history, we see that they're incredibly volatile. But over time, as the brands get accepted, they stabilize over time, and the volatility suppresses.
I think, though, one of the interesting concepts that you bring up is this notion of trust. So trust, which is an intangible most of the time, and certainly we look at it as an intangible. We think of gold as the tangible.
Yeah.
Trust is the intangible. What you suggest is that trust is actually the tangible piece, yes, and all the other things are intangible.
Exactly. Trust is the new gold.
That is a very creative thought. That's like something that you kind of have to sit back and think about that, but it takes a bit to wrap your head around it, but it's a critical issue.
Yeah, and then you have to ask yourself the question, if I think that trust is the new gold, and you think that trust is new gold, it's likely that other people are going to think that trust is new gold, and what are they going to trust the most? Things that are certain. And the thing about Bitcoin is it has certainty encoded into the source code.
There's integrity in the source code.
Integrity in the source code, and it cannot change without a super consensus that is almost impossible to gain. 90% of the network need to agree to make a change to the monetary policy. So that money cannot be inflated because the participants on the network will never vote to increase. There's a 21 million supply cap on Bitcoin. That's all that will ever exist. And the people that are buying it now are buying it because they know that cannot change, won't change, so they're not incentivized to ever change it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's an incredible thing. And I talk a bit about the notion of the difference in return on ROI, return on investment, and ROI, return on integrity. And so I've often suggested that we need to change the way we look at ROI and start thinking about, like, what's my return on integrity? But I hadn't thought about it in terms of this kind of integrity, because then your investment in Bitcoin, the return is a return on integrity.
Absolutely. It's a return on integrity. And you also want to consider, will it hold its integrity through the long arc of time and history? And that's where the fundamentals of the design decisions that went into designing Bitcoin come into play, because it's completely decentralized. No one can ever take control. Doesn't matter how the political social winds change, it can't be captured. And so that becomes very attractive if you're a historian that looks through and sees.
So let's move to where Bitcoin was birthed.
Yep.
You like to say the Immaculate Conception,
Yes.
which is blockchain technology.
Yeah, so Bitcoin birthed the blockchain. Bitcoin was the immaculate conception of the blockchain. And what a blockchain is a decentralized ledger. It's a decentralized database. So you have two types of databases. You have a database that is very fast and efficient, and but it's controlled by an individual party. If we think about banks, they have their own databases. The Federal Reserve has a database of who has what money where. And then you have a decentralized database, and the way the decentralized database works is through the mining process. These miners are securing every transaction that takes place. Those transactions form a block, and every 10 minutes, a new block is added to the blockchain, and that's how we get blockchain. And so it's a consensus-driven, decentralized database that keeps track of every transaction that ever took place. It's immutable. You can't change the record, and its best feature is that there's no single point of attack. There's no single entity that you can either take control over or somehow degrade to manipulate that record, that ledger record.
And one of the things you like to talk about is that versus a database, a centralized database that I hold. So I'm big corporation X, I'm Megla, I hold the database of everyone, and I control it, and your data is in my database. Versus on the blockchain, I still have a piece of that.
Right.
So even though you at Megla have the big piece in your distributed chain, in your blockchain, but I still have a piece of my data.
Absolutely, and so
that changes the essential relationship that I have.
It absolutely does, because if you're entrusting your data with a third party like Megla, if they have your data, then they can start to, put permission in front of it, right? Start to set criteria about your access to your own data, and they do that in certain cases. With these decentralized networks, it's permissionless. So in many cases, there's no way for the network or the protocol to even identify. Certainly in the case of Bitcoin, it's open access to everyone. Anybody could have a piece of that ledger. It's just, there's no original sin.
Right.
It was designed to be neutral. So it's got all these incredible properties to it that really make it a
So now let's talk about Bitcoin's, the other birth from the blockchain, Bitcoin's younger brother, but opposite in certain ways, NFTs.
Yeah, so NFTs. So NFT stands for non-fungible token. And what makes an NFT is that property, that every token is unique from every other token. And whereas Bitcoin is fungible, so every Bitcoin, doesn't matter what Bitcoin I have or you have, they're all still just Bitcoins. So with NFTs, there's a whole new world of possibilities that can open up because you have the ability to create value around, a brand, create value around an idea, art. The first manifestation of NFTs was art because it makes sense. Art is unique from one another. And what's also interesting about art and the way that's developed, and this could help spur the creative process, is if we look at art in the physical world, what gives art in the physical world value? There's a couple of attributes. How old is that art, right? Older art is more valuable, and you certainly see
Sometimes.
It depends on the art.
Right.
But you certainly see it in the NFT space where some of the older projects are more valuable than the newer
But also
projects.
the provenance. I mean, I would actually start with the provenance of the art, right? Because that's the critical issue. And that's always the biggest piece. Like if you follow the Sotheby's or the, Christie's auctions, always the provenance is the issue. And how many times have you read a story about somebody bought something at auction, it turns out the provenance was faked or it's not true, or recently they just discovered another Rembrandt. So, oh my God, it actually is a Rembrandt. Well, they're not sure.
Right.
They think maybe it is, maybe it's not.
And there's no faking it on the blockchain because the blockchain is immutable. So there's no faking it on the blockchain. So that's something that's built right into the protocol. It's built right into just being in the NFT space. You get all these amazing attributes. And the other thing that you get is just, let's think about social media, for example. You build a platform like Twitter, right? You create a space for people to interact with each other. And I'm sure when Jack Dorsey created Twitter, he could never foresee the amount of creativity that blossomed. And now we see, people using Twitter in all different kinds of ways and unique ways and fun ways. And that's what NFTs represent.
And also bad ways.
Terrible
Separate
ways.
issue.
Separate, yeah. But the idea of an open, permissionless platform that is just fertile ground to sprout creativity is a parallel that we could take from, what we see with these, with social media.
So let's bring it to the real world, because so many of the people that we deal with, our clients for sure, are trying to bridge two worlds. So unless they completely change their business models and stop selling hamburgers or stop selling cars and only sell them in the metaverse someplace, wherever that might be, and create, NFTs and be happy to make that kind of profit and go home, and then the rest of us will just have to go forage for food and figure out what we do. But somebody like you, who's also a collector of watches, and you love watches, and you love the complexity of watches, you love the mechanical,
the workmanship
absolutely. Of it. You collect Rolexes.
The scarcity.
So, the scarcity of it. So explain, because I think it's fascinating, the role of NFTs and the physical watch.
So if we can imagine a watchmaker, right? And I would love this. If a watchmaker came out tomorrow and said, we're issuing a new watch, on the back is a QR code, scan the QR code, and that watch will be verifiable on a blockchain, and the provenance and the ownership of that watch will also be on that blockchain, then what they're really doing is creating first of all, they're eliminating the whole business of authenticity and judging. They're creating trust in their watch by just simply scanning a QR code, not only verifying that it was actually issued by the manufacturer, but who owns that watch. So if that watch one day, the physical watch, gets stolen, it's not as valuable as the watch that gets sold to in a valid way, where I also transfer that NFT over to the next buyer, right, to the next owner of that watch. So that's just one idea about how you could deliver trust to your customers. There's other examples that we can talk about how.
But that is a big idea.
That's huge.
Car dealers could do it. It's always an
Titles.
issue of how you transfer the title of a car.
Yeah.
Was the car in an accident? Was it not? Was it so? I mean, there's all kinds of things that you could.
Really, if you
it's
really,
a big idea.
Yeah, if you really think about it, literally any value transfer that is not money can be tokenized into an NFT. And what that means and how to leverage this new fertile ground is where I think the brands have an amazing, and creatives have an amazing opportunity. If they can understand the technology and how to leverage that technology, they know their clients, they know their customers better than anyone. They know what makes them tick. They know their most loyal, users or customers. All they need to do is understand this technology, understand what's possible, and
be creative.
Bring their creativity, which they should have on tap, right? And
right. But I think to your point, the issue is how do you do things that are actually practical, that are real, that add value, and not just stuff that, okay, yeah, let's go create an NFT bag and sell it to get some publicity for ourselves, as opposed to thinking, okay, what can I actually do that uses that technology, that uses Bitcoin, that uses blockchain as a base, that uses NFTs as an enabler, and creates something new and of value.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a big thing. So tell us, why have you decided to be a sponsor of the Future Now categories? First, we thank you, because it's a great category.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. We're all very excited about this. I see that the NFT space, the what can be created in the NFT space is just an incredibly untapped opportunity for brands today. And anything that we can do to help them understand it and promote ideas within the space, whatever we could do to spur that creative process is something that we definitely want to be involved in. And there's an opportunity for brands to create, think about this in a way of creating values for their customers and value for their end users. They're going to, by virtue, create value for themselves. And I want to be part of that process. And, Sasco Digital, we're very excited to be able to.
And so what are you hoping comes out of the jury?
I'm hoping that the jury selects a winner for this category that really embraces the vision of what NFTs can represent and takes that and actually implements it in their creative pursuits.
And what does that winner have to look forward to, we hope?
An NFT award, which we're going to be minting. We still have to work through the process, but we're going to be minting an NFT award that is going to be a digital manifestation of the physical award.
I love it.
Yeah, we're putting our money where our mouth is.
I love it. Well, thank you, Omar. Thank you so much for being our guest. Thank you so much for sponsoring the category, for being part of this world, for challenging our industry to be creative, but to be usefully and importantly creative, using Bitcoin, using blockchain technology, and of course creating NFTs that actually serve a purpose in the world, because there is so much purpose that they can serve and so much good we can do with these things. So I thank you all for listening. We welcome your entries. This is an important new category. Think about what you've heard today. Think about the NFT that you might win, and who knows what that could be worth. It's going to be 10,000 years from now, that NFT will still give the provenance of your award in ways that nothing else ever will. So we thank you. Thank you for being an FOD, a friend of David's, a friend of mine. Thank you for bringing me to grad school and teaching me all that you have.
Thanks for having us.
And also, by the way, for providing all of our entrants and everybody who's connected to the festival with educational materials, with a curriculum around blockchain, around Bitcoin, around NFTs, so that we can learn more and go to the same graduate school that you so kindly
Thank you. If I could just say one thing, I want to thank you very much for creating this this conversation, for creating this discussion. If you're listening to this right now and you're interested in what you hear, stay tuned, and we're going to have some really exciting news on what we can do to help brands and creatives leverage the space to create value.
Good. That excites me. Thank you. So, thank you all for listening. Thank you for being part of New York Festival's Creativity from the Other Side. Omar Sabek, an incredible session. I hope you learned as much as I did. And from our studios, Lower Manhattan, 7 World Trade Center, thanks.